My name is Vicky Sanchez. I'm 33 years old, and for most of my life, I've been the kind of person everyone depends on and no one really sees. You ever do something genuinely kind for someone thinking it'll mean the world to them, only for them to react like you've personally insulted them, like you handed them your heart and they tossed it back at you with a wrinkle of disgust? That kind of moment doesn't explode, it sinks. It settles into your chest and hardens there, quiet and heavy, until one day you realize it changed you. I've never been the loud one in my family. I wasn't the charismatic sibling, the charming one, the person people gravitated toward at parties. That was always my younger sister, Mallory Sanchez. Mallory is 29, now married to Derek Collins, and the mother of a 14-year-old son named Bryson, a kid who somehow manages to combine the entitlement of a spoiled child with the cynicism of a burned-out influencer twice his age. Growing up, Mallory was sunshine. Teachers loved her. Relatives doted on her. She could do no wrong. Meanwhile, I was reliable. The one who stayed quiet, cleaned up messes, remembered birthdays, filled in the gaps when something fell apart. If someone needed help, I was already halfway there before they finished asking. And I didn't resent her for it. Not really. I told myself that every family needs someone steady, someone who holds things together behind the scenes. I wore that role like a badge of honor, even when it started to feel more like a leash. By the time I hit 30, I was doing well for myself. I worked in IT consulting, built a small business helping local companies with cybersecurity and infrastructure, and made enough to live comfortably. Not flashy, no luxury cars or designer labels. But I was the person who could quietly cover emergencies without blinking. The air conditioner dies in July. I've got it. Someone's short on rent. I'll float it for now. That's exactly what I did for Mallory and Derek a few years ago when their AC unit gave out in the middle of summer. Bryson was apparently melting to death, and Mallory called me half laughing, half panicked. "Evie, you're our tech genius," she said. "Can you help us out?" I paid for a brand new unit. Never got reimbursed. Never got a thank you card. I told myself that was just family. Then came the house. About a year ago, they bought a fixer-upper about 20 minutes outside the city. Mallory called it their forever home. Derek called it an investment. Problems surfaced almost immediately. Water damage, sagging floors, a deck that looked like it had been built by someone guessing. And of course, they turned to me. At first, it was advice. Then it became expectation. Then obligation. Before I realized it, my weekends belonged to their renovation. My money quietly patched their mistakes. I told myself it was fine, that maybe this sacrifice would finally earn me a seat at the table instead of a spot in the background. Then Bryson's birthday came. 14. Awkward age. Mallory mentioned he was obsessed with gaming, and I remembered him complaining at Thanksgiving about his old console lagging. I wanted to do something nice, not grand, just thoughtful. I bought him a PS5 Slim, brand new, wrapped neatly, and brought it to their combined housewarming and birthday party feeling hopeful. Foolishly hopeful. When Mallory peeked into the bag, she smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh, that's expensive, right?" she said. "I just hope it's the one he wanted." That should have been my warning. When Bryson opened it in front of everyone, his expression soured instantly. "I said I wanted the Pro," he said flatly. "This is the budget one." Before I could respond, he dropped the box on the floor. "I don't want it. It's trash." The room went silent. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I picked up my jacket and turned to leave. Mallory stepped in front of me. "Vicky, wait," she said sharply. "You can't just leave. That'll upset him." I looked at my parents. No support, just silence. "I bought him a console," I said calmly. "And I'm supposed to apologize." "You embarrassed him," she snapped. "You should have asked first." That was it. I walked out. What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was how much I'd already invested in their lives, their house, their future. That night, I opened my laptop, stared at the folder labeled Mallory House Docs, and felt something shift. And that was just the beginning. I didn't hear from Mallory after the party. Not the next morning. Not the next week. No text saying Bryson had calmed down. No awkward apology wrapped in excuses. Not even a passive-aggressive "sorry you felt hurt." Just silence, the kind that doesn't soothe, only echoes. At first, I told myself she was embarrassed, or busy, or waiting for me to reach out first, the way I always did. I gave it a few days, then a week, then 2. Every time my phone buzzed, my chest tightened, and every time it wasn't her, that tightness stayed. Then I saw the photos. It was a quiet Sunday morning. I was half awake, scrolling through Facebook with my coffee cooling beside me, when Mallory's name popped up at the top of my feed. A new post. Bright, polished, celebratory. Bryson's dream gaming setup. So proud of our boy. The first photo hit me like a slap. There he was grinning ear to ear in front of a setup that looked ripped straight out of a YouTuber's room tour, neon LED strips lining the walls, dual monitors, a custom mechanical keyboard glowing like a spaceship control panel. And right there, front and center on the desk, unmistakable in its white casing and sleek design, sat a PS5 Pro. My stomach dropped. I scrolled. Photo after photo, different angles, different poses. Bryson leaning back in a gaming chair that probably cost more than my couch. Mallory standing behind him, hands on his shoulders, smiling like she'd just won some invisible parenting award. The comments made it worse. Wow, he's so lucky. Best mom ever. You really listened to him. That setup is insane. I felt my chest tighten as if someone were slowly pressing a palm against my sternum. Then I saw it. Buried in the replies, someone asked where they'd even found a Pro since it was sold out everywhere. Mallory replied, "We had to return something else he got first, but it all worked out. Never settle right." I stared at that sentence for a long time. She'd returned the PS5 Slim, the one I bought, the one Bryson dropped on the floor like it was garbage. I hadn't even asked for it back. I'd assumed naively that they'd apologize or reimburse me, or at the very least acknowledge how humiliating that moment had been. Instead, she turned it into content. I didn't comment. I didn't react. I didn't message her. I just closed the app and sat there, coffee forgotten, letting the humiliation sink in like wet cement. That afternoon, I opened my laptop again. The folder was still there, Mallory House Docs. I hadn't created it out of bitterness. I like organization. I track expenses for everything work, taxes, travel. Over the months, every time I covered a contractor overage or paid for materials to keep their renovation moving, I logged it. Quietly, methodically. I opened the spreadsheet. The total at the bottom stared back at me. On $28,763. My throat went dry. I scrolled up line by line. Materials, labor advances, emergency replacements, fees I'd paid so their contractors wouldn't walk, and then highlighted in a different color, the loan. The renovation loan I had co-signed with Derek. I remembered the conversation clearly. He'd sat across from me at their half-finished kitchen island papers, spread out, voice casual. "It's short-term," he'd said. "Just helps us qualify for better rates. We'll refinance by spring and take your name off. Promise." I hadn't hesitated. That's what family did right. It was now mid-July. No refinance. No update. No acknowledgement that my credit, my financial future was tied to their Pinterest-fueled dream. I drafted an email to Derek, polite, professional, neutral. "Hey, just checking in on the refinancing timeline. Rates look favorable right now." 2 days later, he replied with 3 words. "We're working on it." That was it. A week passed. I followed up. Nothing. Then Mallory texted me. "Why are you pressuring Derek about the loan? We told you we've got it under control. This really isn't your place." I read that message over and over until the words blurred. Not my place. My name was on the paperwork. My credit score was tied to their payments. I had funded their renovation and been publicly humiliated for it, and now I was being treated like an inconvenience. I didn't reply. Instead, I logged into the loan portal. The payments were technically current, but just barely. Minimums met at the last possible moment. Grace periods already used. The numbers told a story I didn't want to admit out loud. They were bleeding money. And suddenly that PS5 Pro didn't look like a splurge, it looked like a warning. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling, feeling something unfamiliar settle in my chest. Not anger, not yet. Clarity. This wasn't kindness anymore. It hadn't been for a while. It was extraction, slow, quiet, normalized. And I was finally seeing the bill. The invitation came from my parents 3 days later. Nothing dramatic, just a casual group text from my mom, hot dogs, potato salad, backyard, Saturday afternoon. The kind of gathering that's supposed to signal normalcy. I considered declining. Every part of me knew it would be easier to stay home to avoid the forced smiles and the way my chest tightened whenever Mallory was in the same space as me. But curiosity won. I wanted to see them. Wanted to know if anyone would acknowledge what happened, if Mallory would say anything at all, or if we were all just going to pretend the PS5 never hit the floor. When I arrived, Mallory was already there, perched at the patio table in oversized sunglasses and a wide-brimmed hat, scrolling through her phone like she was being photographed for something. Bryson sprawled across a lounge chair, earbuds and thumbs, flying over his screen. Derek stood by the grill, nodding at me once, before turning back to the burgers. No one mentioned the party. Not a word about the gift, not a hint of apology, not even an awkward joke meant to smooth things over. It was as if that night had been collectively erased. Halfway through the meal, my mom clinked her glass, smiling too brightly. So she said Mallory and Derek have some exciting news. Mallory slid her sunglasses up onto her head and grinned. It's still early, she said, but we're planning to flip the house. The words didn't register at first. Flip, the house, I repeated. She nodded, energized now. Yeah, the market's insane. We've already talked to a couple realtors. They think it could sell for almost double what we paid. I looked around the table. My dad nodded like this was perfectly reasonable. Derek smirked, clearly proud of himself. Even my mom looked excited already, envisioning bragging rights. You're selling, I asked. Soon. Not immediately, Mallory said, waving a hand. But once the market peaks, we've done all the hard work. My jaw tightened. And the loan, I asked carefully. Derek shrugged. We'll roll it into the sale. No big deal. No big deal, I repeated louder than I meant to. I'm still on that loan, Derek. He frowned. We told you we'd handle it. You haven't, I said. It's been almost a year. Mallory sighed like I was ruining the vibe. Vicky, can we not do this now? This is supposed to be a fun afternoon. I'm not making a scene, I said, though my hands were shaking under the table. I'm asking how you plan to sell a house you renovated using my name and my credit without talking to me. Silence. Then my dad cleared his throat. Maybe this conversation is better had in private. I stared at him. Private, I asked. You all knew. He shifted uncomfortably. They're your sister and brother-in-law. Sometimes we help family. Not everything needs to be tit for tat. Something clicked then. This wasn't an oversight. It wasn't miscommunication. This was expectation. They truly believed my role was to give and step back, to absorb the cost quietly so everyone else could celebrate. Mallory laughed. Actually laughed. Don't be so dramatic, she said. You always take things so personally. I felt it then, not anger, not sadness, something colder, clearer. I stood up. You're right, I said evenly. Not everything needs to be tit for tat, but manipulation isn't family. And neither is pretending this is normal. No one stopped me as I walked out. That night I didn't cry. I didn't rant to friends. I opened my laptop again. This time I wasn't just organizing numbers. I was preparing. Because if they thought I was going to sit back and watch them profit off my money, my credit and my silence, they were wrong. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to clean up their mess. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan as it clicked softly in the dark, each rotation marking time between who I had been and who I was slowly realizing I needed to become. My phone sat face down on the nightstand. No messages, no missed calls, no sudden wave of remorse from my family. Just silence and strangely clarity. Sometime around 3:40 a.m., I sat up, swung my legs over the side of the bed, and opened my laptop. I didn't have a plan yet. Not a real one. Just a growing certainty that continuing the way I had always lived, quiet, accommodating endlessly. Understanding was no longer an option. Walking away wasn't simple. Not when my name was still legally attached to their house. Not when my credit score could be wrecked by decisions I had no control over. So I started researching. The renovation loan was joint. That meant there was no clean exit without either a refinance in their name alone or full repayment. Both options required cooperation. Cooperation I no longer trusted them to offer. I emailed the loan servicer, explaining the situation carefully, stripping the story of emotion and leaving only facts. 3 days later, the response came back. Due to your cosigner status, you remain jointly liable for the outstanding balance until the loan is refinanced or paid in full. Translation, I was stuck. For the first time since the party, I felt something close to panic. Not explosive fear, something quieter, heavier. Being used was one thing. Being trapped was another. I tried to distract myself with work. My consulting business had been steady, but I realized how much energy I'd been bleeding into unpaid family labor. Weekends gone, evenings interrupted, boundaries blurred. I tightened my schedule, stopped answering quick questions that turned into 5-hour favors, raised my rates, reached out to old contacts I'd neglected. The shift was almost immediate. Referrals started coming in. I landed a contract with a mid-sized logistics company that needed a full cybersecurity overhaul across multiple locations. The retainer alone matched what I'd sunk into Mallory's house. And unlike family, they paid on time. Around the same time, I started therapy. I didn't tell anyone. Not because I was ashamed, but because it felt private, something that was just mine. In that office, for the first time, someone said the words I hadn't allowed myself to think. It makes sense that you feel used, my therapist said calmly. Because you were. Hearing it out loud felt like breathing after being underwater too long. I wasn't dramatic, I wasn't selfish, I wasn't a bad sister. I was just done being convenient. One evening, after a particularly intense session, I walked through my apartment and really looked at it, not as a place I crashed between obligations, but as my life. The second bedroom still half converted into an office. The espresso machine I'd talked myself out of buying for years. The bathroom remodel I kept postponing because someone else always needed something first. I made a list. Not a revenge list, not yet, just a me list. And for the first time in a long time, it felt good. But beneath that calm, something was shifting, something structural. Because while I was quietly rebuilding my life, Mallory and Derek were still playing games. And soon one of those games was going to come due. The envelope was thin, too thin to contain anything good. I recognized the return address before I even opened it, the loan servicing company. I'd already seen the alert online, but something about holding the paper in my hands made it real in a way a digital notification never could. Payment overdue. 4 days past due. 4 days wasn't catastrophic. Yet. But it was enough to trigger a formal notice, enough to leave a mark, enough to remind me that my financial stability was still tethered to people who treated accountability like an optional setting. I called Derek immediately, straight to voicemail. I texted Mallory. Nothing. 2 days passed, then 3. On the 4th day, I called my parents' house. My mom answered, her voice already tight, like she'd been bracing herself for the call. Vicky, she said, maybe now isn't a great time. Why not, I asked, already knowing. A pause. Then, they're going through a rough patch. Derek's work slowed down, and Mallory's picking up the slack. They're trying. I closed my eyes. I understand, I said quietly. That's why I covered almost $30,000 of their renovation. That's why I co-signed their loan. Don't throw that in their faces, she interrupted, lowering her voice. You've always been better off. Maybe just let this go. They'll catch up. Just like that, I was the problem again. The ungrateful one. The one making things awkward. The one who couldn't just absorb the cost for the sake of family harmony. I didn't argue, I didn't raise my voice, I just ended the call. Because while they thought this was a surprise, I'd been watching the signs for months. The Instagram posts, the sponsored brunches, Mallory's sudden pivot into lifestyle content filmed in the very house I helped build, Derek's half-baked business ventures that promised passive income and delivered nothing but excuses. That night I emailed the attorney I'd quietly contacted weeks earlier. Her name was Caroline Bennett. She wasn't flashy, no marble office, no slick branding, just sharp eyes, a reputation for real estate litigation, and a no-nonsense approach that made me feel grounded the moment we spoke. We went through everything, every receipt, every email, every verbal promise I'd foolishly trusted. Caroline leaned back in her chair when we were done. You have leverage, she said simply. Not enough to take the house, but enough to make things very uncomfortable. Most of the renovation payments had been made through my business account, many of the permits filed under my name. Some inspections signed using my contractor credentials because they hadn't bothered to get theirs approved in time. I hadn't broken any laws, but I'd left a paper trail. And paper trails matter. A week later, the final push came. I was working from a coffee shop downtown when my phone buzzed. A message from a friend of mine who used to work with Derek. Hey, hate to be the one to tell you this, but I just saw Mallory and Derek at an open house. They're telling people they're already in escrow on their current place. My hands went cold. I checked the property listings. There it was. Pending sale. They were selling. Without telling me. Without refinancing. Without paying me back. They were going to walk away clean and leave me holding the liability. Something clicked into place then. Not rage, not sadness. Resolve. I closed my laptop, paid for my coffee, and walked out into the afternoon sun feeling strangely calm. They thought I was still the quiet one. They were about to learn I wasn't anymore. I didn't respond to the message right away. I sat there for a long moment, phone face down on the cafe table, watching people pass by the window, laughing, arguing, living their uncomplicated little afternoons, completely unaware that somewhere nearby, someone had just crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Mallory and Derek were selling the house. Not thinking about it, not planning to. They were already in escrow. I opened my phone again and searched the listing myself, half hoping I'd misheard. I hadn't. There it was, their address, pending sale. A carousel of professional photos filled the screen, bright, airy, immaculate. The white kitchen with the custom island I'd helped pay for. The hardwood floors I'd spent 3 weekends helping level. The backyard I'd watched Derek brag about online as if it had appeared by magic. The listing description called it a fully updated modern family home with premium finishes. Premium. It didn't mention the unpaid labor, it didn't mention the co-signed loan, and it definitely didn't mention me. That was when the calm hardened into something unmovable. They hadn't just taken advantage of me. They'd made a calculated decision to cut me out entirely. No warning, no conversation, no attempt to clean up the mess they knew they'd made. I wasn't part of the plan anymore. I was a liability they hoped would stay quiet. I called Caroline Bennett the next morning. She didn't sound surprised. I was expecting this call, she said after I filled her in. Selling without your release gives us exactly the leverage we need. Within hours, we were in motion. The first step was surgical. Caroline filed a notice of interest on the property, a legal document that didn't scream or threaten, but quietly froze the sale. Title companies hate uncertainty, and this document was nothing but uncertainty. It signaled that someone else had a legitimate financial claim tied to the house, one that had to be resolved before any sale could close. It wasn't a lien, but it might as well have been. Next came the demand letter. Caroline drafted it with precision, itemizing every cent I'd paid, materials, contractor advances, emergency replacements fees, all backed by receipts and dates. When she finished tallying everything, the number was even higher than I remembered. She rounded it cleanly. $32,000. Then she looked at me and asked a question I hadn't anticipated. Do you want to keep this private, she said, or do you want the family to know? I hesitated. For years, I'd protected them. Absorbed discomfort, swallowed resentment so no one else had to feel awkward. But something about them selling the house behind my back made me realize the truth. The boat wasn't just rocked. It had been taking on water for years. Send it to everyone, I said. Caroline helped me craft the email. Professional, calm, unemotional, the kind of message that doesn't accuse it documents. I sent it to Mallory, Derek, my parents, even extended family members who'd always conveniently stayed neutral. Subject legal claim filed regarding Mallory and Derek's property sale. I turned my phone off immediately after. Not out of fear. Out of control. For once, I wasn't going to react. I was going to let them sit with it. When I turned my phone back on the next evening, the fallout had already begun. Missed calls, voicemails, texts swinging wildly between anger, guilt, disbelief, and panic. Mallory, Derek, my dad, my mom, and one message from a cousin who had never once taken my side before. About time. I didn't respond, because the next step wasn't about defending myself anymore. It was about finishing what I'd started. The first call I answered was Derek's. I let it ring 3 times before picking up. Not to be dramatic, but because I needed the space to breathe, to center myself in the calm I'd worked so hard to build. What the hell is this, Vicky? He snapped the moment I said hello. His voice was tight-clipped, trying to sound angry enough to mask how rattled he actually was. You can't just file claims without talking to us first. This is serious. I almost smiled. It is serious, I said evenly. That's why I hired a lawyer. There was a pause on the line. I could practically hear the recalculation happening in his head, the moment where he realized this wasn't a misunderstanding he could charm or bulldoze his way through. You blindsided us, he said. We thought you were over all that. Over being used, I asked quietly, or over being ignored. Silence again, longer this time. He tried a different angle. Look, it's not like we didn't appreciate everything you did. You returned my gift, I cut in my voice, still calm. You mocked it publicly, and then you tried to sell the house behind my back. Don't talk to me about appreciation. His sigh came out heavy, exaggerated, as if he were the one carrying the burden here. So what, you're going to blow up the whole deal out of spite? No, I said. I'm going to get what I'm owed. If that delays your plans, that's on you. He argued. He minimized. He tried to guilt me, to imply I was overreacting, that this would hurt the family, that my parents were furious. None of it landed. Finally, his voice dropped. Fine. We'll talk to our agent. Maybe there's a way to work you in. You have 7 days, I said. After that, my attorney takes the next step. Then I hung up. The calls didn't stop after that. Mallory tried next. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail, her tone swinging wildly between outrage and disbelief. How could you do this to us? Do you have any idea what you've done? This was supposed to be our fresh start. My dad's voicemail was worse tight with disappointment, heavy with accusation. You've gone too far this time, Vicky. This is tearing the family apart. My mom's messages were quieter, sadder. You didn't have to do this. We could have talked. We had talked for years. They just hadn't listened. I didn't respond to any of them because the truth was, for the first time in my life, I wasn't panicking. I wasn't scrambling to smooth things over or explain myself. I wasn't trying to make anyone comfortable. They were panicking. 7 days passed. No apology, no payment, no real attempt to fix anything. On the 8th day, Carolyn forwarded me an email from their real estate agent. We'd like to open a discussion regarding terms for the release of the notice of interest so the pending sale may proceed. Caroline looked at me across her desk and smirked. They're scared, she said. I nodded. Good. Because now, finally, the balance had shifted and I wasn't the one scrambling anymore. Caroline didn't rush. That was the first thing I noticed when she read the agent's email aloud. No urgency, no adrenaline, just a calm, deliberate pause like a chess player studying a board she already knew how to win. They want this to go away quickly, she said, which means we don't. I sat back in the chair across from her desk, hands folded, feeling an unexpected sense of stillness settle over me. For weeks, I'd been braced for impact, waiting for the emotional crash, the guilt spiral, the moment where I'd second-guess everything. But it never came. What I felt instead was control. Clean and unfamiliar, but steady. Caroline drafted the response that afternoon. Professional, polite, unyielding. We outlined the $32,000 restitution payable directly from the sale proceeds at closing. No installments, no delays, no verbal promises. Then came the non-negotiable addition, the full release of liability. My name removed from the renovation loan. No future responsibility. No lingering exposure if something went wrong after the sale. That clause is what will make them squirm, Caroline said. It forces them to acknowledge in writing that you were never just helping out. You were financially entangled. She was right. Within 48 hours, the tone shifted. The agent's replies grew shorter, more cautious, less confident. Mallory's lawyer, yes, she'd hired one, entered the conversation trying to soften the language to suggest compromise. Caroline shut it down cleanly. No payment, no release, she wrote. My client will not sign otherwise. Another day passed. Then two. On the third morning, Caroline called me. They've agreed, she said simply. All of it. I closed my eyes. The settlement documents came through that afternoon. I read every page slowly, deliberately, my signature hovering over the line longer than it needed to. This wasn't triumph, it was closure. A line drawn so clearly it couldn't be blurred again. Mallory and Derek signed the next day. The loan was paid off in full as part of the sale. My name was removed. The title transferred cleanly. And then quietly, without ceremony, the wire transfer hit my account. $32,000. Caroline called to confirm. It's done, Vicky, she said. You're free. I thanked her, then sat there in my apartment as the sun dipped below the skyline light, pooling across the floor in long golden streaks. Relief didn't rush in. It seeped, slowly, like warmth returning to a limb you hadn't realized was numb. For the first time in years, my finances were mine again. My future wasn't tied to anyone else's irresponsibility. My silence wasn't being mistaken for consent. I'd spent so long being the dependable one, the background support, the person who held everything together for everyone else. And somewhere along the way, I'd forgotten that stability without respect is just another form of exploitation. Now the board was clear, and the game, at least this one, was over. The fallout didn't come all at once. It arrived in waves, texts first, then calls, then silence again. Mallory reached out 2 days after the closing. I didn't answer. She tried again an hour later. Then she texted, I hope you're happy. Bryson cried when we told him we can't afford the new house now. Hope that feels good. 5 minutes later, another message. You humiliated us. Our agent said she's never seen anything like this. Dad's furious. Then the last one, the one she always used when she was losing ground. We're family, Vicky. You ruined everything. I stared at the screen longer than I expected to. Not because I felt guilty, but because I didn't. I replied once. Just once. You built a house on my back and tried to sell it out from under me. You can be angry about the consequences, but don't confuse that with betrayal. I didn't ruin anything. I just stopped fixing your mess. She never responded. My dad called the next morning. His voice carried that familiar weight of disappointment, the kind he used when he wanted me to fold without saying so directly. You didn't have to go that far, he said. This family is falling apart. I took a breath before answering. I went as far as they pushed me, I said. And this family didn't fall apart. It's just finally being held accountable. We haven't spoken since. My mom reached out weeks later, not to argue, not to defend. Just quietly. I didn't realize how bad it had gotten, she admitted. You were always the one we could count on. I said, And maybe that's the problem. You stopped checking if I was okay being counted on. She didn't argue with that. As for Mallory and Derek, the dream unraveled quickly. After paying me back and clearing their debts, their credit couldn't support a new mortgage. The new build fell through. They're renting now 40 minutes outside the city, no backyard, no granite counters, no room for curated lifestyle content. Bryson hates it, apparently. A part of me feels bad for him. He didn't choose to be raised that way. But another part of me remembers the way he dropped that PS5 and looked at me like I was disposable, so no, I don't lose sleep over it. What I do sleep is better. My business has grown steadily. Probably because I finally stopped draining my energy into people who treated generosity like an entitlement. I took the trip I'd written on my list months earlier, Portugal, a small villa by the ocean. No notifications, no obligations. Just books, espresso, and quiet. I remodeled my own kitchen with the money they paid me back. Bought the espresso machine I'd talked myself out of for years. Installed smart lighting that actually works. Small things. But they mattered because they were mine. Every time I walk into my home now, I don't feel like someone who was taken advantage of. I feel like someone who chose herself. So yes, Mallory threw a tantrum. Derek fumbled the future. My parents still think I went too far. But they all learned something important. The quiet one isn't weak, she's just patient. And when she finally moves, she finishes what she started.